We're in this series that we started last week called Face to Face. Turn to someone and say face to face. Hopefully they looked at you. Hopefully they have a face. The premise of this series is real simple if you weren't here last week. The closer, the more face to face you are with Jesus, the more you will discover that the impossible can become possible. And so what we're doing is we're doing a deep dive into some of the most well-known early on, and then the closer we get to the Easter season, maybe not quite as well-known, miracles of Jesus. When people were close to Jesus, they saw Jesus do the impossible. And for those of you who are Bible scholars, those of you who know Scripture, you know that where Jesus did most of his miracles, the environment had something to do with water. If you were here last week, we talked about Jesus and Peter walking on water. And in just a moment, we're going to look at a second miracle that water was very much involved. I have always loved being on the water, but like many of you, I grew up in a town. I grew up 70 miles north of here in Lynchburg. I didn't grow up on the water. But listen, my dad's brother, my uncle, he had a little trailer on Leesville Lake, and that's the first time I ever learned how to water ski was on Leesville Lake. I was not very good. I almost died 16 times learning how to do it. I was just a little kid. And then later on, he went from Leesville Lake, and my uncle had a house off the area, but in the Smith Mountain Lake region. And so I learned how to, did more water skiing there as a kid growing up. I tried to learn how to slalom. That's skiing on one ski at Smith Mountain Lake. And again, I said I tried. I did not succeed. I tried a lot of times over the course of a weekend, and I never got that down. So I don't know how to do that. But I didn't grow up on the water, but I've always enjoyed being near the water. And when I was 23, 24 years old, I became a middle school pastor. At the time, it wasn't middle school. It was called junior high. It was only 7th and 8th grade. They didn't have 6th graders, part of middle school at that time in the 1990s. And so I was a junior high youth pastor at First Baptist Church of Orlando, Florida. And there were about 5,000 people that went to that church, maybe a little bit more. And about 25% of them in Orlando at that church lived on a lake or near the water, because there were tons of lakes, tons of bodies of water. And now sometimes what kids think is a lake or water is a little bit different. I took this one kid home on a Wednesday night, 7th grade kid, took him home, and he told me where he lived. And in those days, you got to remember, there was no Google Maps. There was no GPS. There was not even MapQuest in 1996. And he told me he lived near a lake. What he meant was he lived near a creek. And now, depending on where you grew up, some of you say creek, some of you say crick. I don't think it's a crick because you got a crick in your neck and you live on the creek. That's a whole nother story. I digress. And so, listen, he told me, turn left at this tree, turn right at this car with no tires and it's been beat up. Listen, he lived, for those of you who are 1970 movie buffs, he lived in the area called Deliverance. Listen, when we got to his house, I promise you, I heard and there, and I'm thinking, I had no cell phone. Nobody knows where I'm at. I could die here in the middle of nowhere. That was one Wednesday. The very next Wednesday, I took this other kid home who said he lived near a lake. I thought, oh, goodness, here we go again. This was not quite the same as the first kid. When I pulled up to his neighborhood, there was a security guard at the gated community. And the security guard did not want to let me in because he looked at my car and he said, no, you don't belong in this area. But I was with the kid. I gave him the code. When I pulled around the street to get near his house, he told me, by the way, because he knew, listen, in 1996, all of my sermon, I've expanded since then, but all of my sermon illustrations in the 1990s were sports illustrations, even for my junior high students. And he said, Pastor Scott, by the way, did you know you just passed a very famous baseball player's house? This is 1996. I said, whose house did I just pass? He said, it's just some guy named Ken Griffey Jr. And those of you who are baseball fans, he's one of the greatest home run hitters in the history of baseball. And so I pulled up to his house. He said, oh, by the way, 2 houses down, a guy just moved in there. And he lived right on this beautiful, luxurious lake. And the 2 houses down, he said, listen, I've tried to get a glimpse of him and his house, but he built a wall so high that none of the kids in the neighborhood can see over there unless we get a ladder, which we've done a few times. I said, well, who just moved in? He said, oh, don't worry, it's just some golfer named Tiger Woods. I'm like, one of these things does not belong with the others. And it's me. I do not belong. And he lived on a different lake. Well, anyway, we were on one lake. One of my favorite activities ever was in summer of 1997. Tammy was a student at Liberty University. I was in middle school there. For those of you who don't know our story, the majority of our dating life was long distance. She came down to Orlando, lived with a family in our church so we could date to see if this thing's going to go anywhere or not. And we went and had an activity for about 150, 200 7th and 8th graders on a place called Lake Nona, a beautiful, magnificent lake right there in the heart of Orlando. And we were going to do wakeboarding and tubing and water skiing and have a cookout. And so there we are on a Saturday afternoon on Lake Nona. Hundreds of 7th and 8th graders, and I'm the youth pastor, so I got to make sure all the kids who show up are all the kids who get picked up. All the kids who go on the water do not stay in the water, and they come up out of the water. It's very stressful. So for 4 or 5 hours, it's hot, it's long, there are kids everywhere. I never once get the chance to go out on the water. And so everything's going on. I got to make sure the kids are alive and parents are happy. And so it's a long, physically and mentally exhausting day. And at the end of the day, it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody had gone home. And the house that we stayed at, or the house we were at, his name's Nick. And Nick's dad said to Tammy and I, because we were making sure everybody was having a good time, we hadn't been in the boat on the water all day. He said, do you guys want to go out on the water? And we said, sure. And so here we are. And the boat that he had was like a speed boat. This boat was like built for like going really fast, like 60 miles an hour. And we get out there, like it's like 2 feet off the ground. It's some, speed nautique boat. I don't know what it is. It's like really fast and really, firm. Just can skim across the water. And so he said, listen, come on, Scott, you don't want to do water tubing, do you? I said, yeah, I kind of do. He said, how about you do something you've never done before? I said, what's that? He said, how about you barefoot water ski? I said, are you on drugs, sir? I said, does Nick not say nice things about me? Do you want me to die? And so I said, listen, I'm 24 years old. I'm an adrenaline junkie. That's what I am. Not really, I'm just making that up. But at 24 years old, you asked me to do something. Oh yeah, I'm going to do it. So here it is. He's got this boat that is built perfectly for barefoot water skiing. And it's one of those things where, this is not a great illustration, but he's got this thing. I know this is PVC pipe. I get it. But it's this thing called a boom. And a boom is a big bar that comes off the side of a speedboat, so you're right near the boat, not way behind the boat. And then coming up out of the boom is a normal, just a normal ski rope. Now, it's not this long. It's real short, so it's real close to the boom and real close to the boat. He says, Scott, just hold on, and after about 3 seconds, you will come up out of the water. Now, listen to me, Scott, clearly. You're going to drink 400 gallons of water in about 4 seconds. But if you can survive that, then you will skim across the water and you will barefoot water ski. I thought that sounds great until you actually do it. So I come up out of the water and I'm kind of there and I'm drinking 400 gallons of water. And I thought, I've heard of alcohol intoxication, but can you die of water intoxication even if you're not under the water? And I found out you almost can. And so I come up out of the water, and it's a disaster. I don't even get up. I'm just spinning around. I'm holding on, and I'm going like this, and my body's like this, and I'm bouncing, and I'm skipping, and I'm sliding, and then I let go of the rope, and it's a bad scene. And I'm hurting. I've got bruises. I've got my ribs have been kicked in. My shoulder's out of place. He says, let's do it again. I'm like, are you crazy? And guess what I did? I did it again. And then I did it a third time. And after the third time, my arms are like jello. My legs are jello. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I've been beat up. I've been flapping on the water like a dead fish. Have you seen a dead fish float on water? I can show you because I did it. And Tammy, on the other hand, she can barefoot water ski. I don't know if that's true. She did better than I did. I'll tell you that. And here's the deal. I'm 24 years old. I'm dating this woman. And guess what? Ain't no woman going to show me up. No way, no how. Listen, in those days, I was a little bit competitive. In those days, I've grown a little bit since then. Not a whole lot. I said a little bit. So I did it a 4th time. And on the 4th time, I come up, I'm drinking the water. I feel like I'm going to drown. I feel like I'm going to die. And then I'm barefoot water skiing. Oh, hold on. Don't get excited yet. I barefoot water ski for 1.2 seconds. And then I bounce and I hit and I let go of the rope. And then I start bouncing on the water. Now remember, this boat is a speedboat, so it's going about 42 miles an hour. So it's a half a mile away from me when I let go of the rope before it can turn around. And it's a good thing, folks, because it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a bright, sunny summer day in Orlando, Florida. But if you were anywhere near eyesight of me on Lake Nona, you had a picture of the full moon. I'm going to let that sit there for a second. Some of you will get it in a half a second. Some of you are like, why is everybody else laughing? My swimsuit had been gone. But fortunately, it wasn't too far away from me. And by the time that boat turned around, by the time everybody got there, I was able to get it back on. Nick had asked his dad, I think you killed Pastor Scott. Did you kill him? Let's go make sure. And guess what? After that day, after that one time right there, I have never been on the water like that since then. I've never tried barefooting, and guess what? In 28 years, I've never even been water skiing. Now, I've done tubing once or twice in the last 28 years, and here's the point of the whole story. I really enjoy the water, but because of experiences I've had on the water, I have a healthy fear of the water. But I also know that when it came to that day on that boat in that moment, the only way I was ever going to learn how to do what I set out to do is if I held on for dear life and didn't let go. And here's the deal. Some of you today, you are going through a situation where you feel like thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water are rushing over your face. We would call that storms of life. Hard times, difficulties, trials, struggles, and you feel like you're about to go under. You feel like you're about to die. And the number one thing you want to do more than anything else is you want to let go. When Jesus says, endure. Because remember, I shared this with you last week. The thing that the disciples knew better than anything else in their life was the water. They grew up on the water. It was their livelihood. They enjoyed the water. It was their restful place. It was their happy place. They loved being on the lake. But guess what they had seen being on the lake as many times as they've been on it? They'd seen the dangers that the lake can do. They've seen the dangers of the Sea of Galilee. And that's where we pick up in this story today. You've heard this before, but I'll say it again. I heard it from my pastor, Dr. Jerry Falwell, growing up 100 times, and you probably heard it from your pastor too when you were a kid growing up. Everybody in life is either in the middle of a storm right now, you just came out of a storm, or you're headed into one. And I don't know what your storm is. I don't know if you're going through a situation right now that you don't know how to handle, you want to give up and quit when it comes to your marriage. When it comes to a job, a relationship, something with your son or your daughter, your mom or your dad, a friend. And sometimes the safest place to be, not sometimes, every time, it may not be the safest place, but you know the best place to be is wherever Jesus is. Look what this story says. Mark chapter 4, let's pick up in verse 35. Mark chapter 4 says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat, and they started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, Jesus, teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, silence, be still. Some of you have learned it where it says, peace, be still. Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? And the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and the waves obey him. Verse 1, chapter 5. So they arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of Gerasenes. Today, some of you are on a boat, just your life, and your life feels like the waves are crashing in over you. And how do I handle it? And you feel like you've gone to Jesus 100 times. Don't you care? and you're waiting for Jesus to wake up and come into your situation, come into your home, come into your life and say, be still. You're waiting for the calm to happen. Listen, if you're taking notes, write this down, because here's the big idea for the day and the big idea for this message. It's the big idea for this series. Listen, being face to face with Jesus does not make life easy. It makes it possible to go on when life isn't. Being face to face or placing your faith in Jesus, it doesn't mean life's going to be easy. It just means you can go on when it isn't. And the question today is this: are you still going on, or are you letting go and giving up? When you're in the middle of the storm, you need to understand two things. Number one, you need to understand the truths behind the storm. You need to understand the truths behind the storm. And number two, you need to understand how to survive the storm. And I hope in just a few minutes that we have together before we close here today, that God's word is able to speak to both of those questions. Let me give you three big truths to why about the storms of life. Number one is this: hard times are unavoidable. Hard truth number one is this: hard times are unavoidable. No matter what you do, no matter how much you try, you cannot avoid some of the difficulties of life. One person said years ago, he said, if you want to avoid criticism, if you want to avoid people saying something negative or hurtful about you, the writer said, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. And the reality is this: I understand the idea behind the statement to avoid criticism, say, do, be nothing. But here's the deal. I promise you this: if you say, do, and be nothing with your life, someone's still going to criticize you. Like, get up, wake up, do something. Do something with your life. Have a work ethic. Go and try to make something. So you're still going to get criticized. And here's the deal. No matter how much you just try to slide through life, unassuming, unannounced, nobody knowing you even exists, you try to isolate yourself from everybody in the world, I promise you this, guess what? You're still going to have hard times. This story shows us that no matter where you are or what you're doing, hard times happen and come to everyone. And the reason why so many people are so frustrated and discouraged with God is because we get this idea in our mind. We have these expectations in our mind of what God is supposed to do. And when God doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, then I have a right to do one of two things. I have a right to quit on God, or I have a right to complain about God. And listen to me. I posted this on my Facebook page the other day, and most of you didn't even see it, which is fine. But I read a quote by an author and pastor out of the Los Angeles area the other day, and he said, I love this quote. He said, many people are frustrated with God for breaking promises he never made. He never promised no pain. He never promised it'd be easy. He never promised you'd get what you want. He promised, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. We think God promised you a life of, name it, comfort, ease, nice. Listen, you have a different idea in your mind, a life of prosperity. And we have this idea that as long as I do A, B, and C, as long as I do A, B, and C, then God will do what God's supposed to do. And listen, he never promised you'd get what you want. He did say in Psalm 37, he said, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. But that verse means that I want what God wants, not what I want. I delight myself in the Lord. That means I ask for God to be seen in and through me. It's not selfish motivation. And when you look at this passage, when you understand this, hard times, storms of life are unavoidable. If I'm going to barefoot water ski, guess what that means? For the first 4 seconds, I got to have all the water in the lake rushing into my face. And if you're going to experience the other side that God has waiting for you, you're going to go through all the water in the world rushing into your face. Now, can I tell you, this may be bad news or this may be good news, but let me give you two realities of what that statement means. Hard times are unavoidable. Here's statement number one. If hard times are unavoidable, here's what that means. It means that hard times happen to everyone. Hard times happen to everyone. It doesn't matter how young or how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're retired or right in the middle of your career. It doesn't matter if you're man or woman. It doesn't matter if you're in college or no college. It doesn't matter if you're married or not married. It doesn't matter what season or stage of life you are in. Hard times happen to everyone. Listen to me. It happened to Jesus. It happened to his disciples. And Matthew 5, verse 45 says this. It says, for he gives sunlight to both the what? The evil and the good. And he brings rain to the just and the unjust alike. In other words, listen to me. You can do absolutely nothing with your life. You can just sit at your home all day, isolate yourself. You can remove yourself from society, and guess what? There's still going to be hard days. There's going to be some storms in your life that you just want to stop. We all face them. We all deal with them. Listen, we know they impact all of us differently. And guess what else? You can do exactly what Jesus wants you to be doing. The just, the good, the godly. What does it say in verse 35? In verse 35, it says this. Jesus told his disciples, get in the boat and let's cross to the other side. Now, little Bible 101. Bible 101, it could be rhetorical, but if you want to respond back. Do you think when Jesus told the disciples to get into the boat, do you think he knew a storm was coming? Yes, we had 2 people answer the question. Thank you, Ricky and Debbie. No. Yes, I did say it could be rhetorical. Yes, he knew it was coming. The disciples, make sure you catch this. The disciples, they did exactly as Jesus commanded them to do, and they still experienced the storms of life. It happens to everyone. You can't avoid it. Listen, you and I know there's no such thing as a perfect Christian. We all have imperfections. We all have failures and faults. But no matter, listen, you can try to, listen, I hope you do. By the way, I hope you try to live out the fruit of the Spirit. I hope you try to experience and express love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. I hope you try to display that every day in your life. I hope you love people the way Jesus loves people. I hope you forgive and serve. I hope you do all that. But guess what? Even if you do, some of you know this. Even if you do, to the best of your ability, that doctor could still call and say, a storm is coming. An employer could call and a storm is coming. A son or daughter may make a decision and a storm is coming. But here's the good news. This is why we don't isolate ourselves. Why does Scripture say we were commanded to live in relationships? Because here's the good news. If you're going through a storm in life, guess what that means? That means somebody else has gone through that same storm. Somebody else has experienced what you're going through. And that's why Galatians 6 verse 2 says this. It says, carry each other's burdens. And in so doing, you fulfill the law of Christ. How do we fulfill the words and the commands of Christ? By letting other people help us carry our burdens and help us through the storms of life, whether it's something in your marriage or something with your parenting or something with your finances or something with your health. God has brought other people through that storm, and you cannot hide it and isolate yourself, because God will bring other people into your life to help you through it. Hard times are unavoidable. That means they happen to everyone. And here's the one that you and I don't like to deal with. Hard times happen when you and I least expect them. Hard times happen when you and I least expect them to happen. That's why we get so frustrated and bent out of shape. Listen, there are always things that people are not prepared for. I told you just a moment ago that we had our online service at 9:15. It was the first time that we done it. I got a text from someone after the 9:15, and they sent me a text and they said, is that really you on stage? And I said, why? They said, because you're dressed so nice. I said, what? I'm dressed. Yeah, you match and you don't have jeans on. I said, well, thank you very much. Listen, I'm not kidding you today. I guarantee you there's been at least 24 people who have come up to me today and said, Pastor Scott, what's gotten into you? I didn't even recognize you. Are you sure is there something wrong with you? I'm like, why? Because you look good. I'm like, I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not. I don't know if that's coming out the way you think it's coming out. They weren't expecting it. Here's the deal. None of you came to church this morning, for those of you that are here with us in the room. None of you got in your car and pulled out onto the road. None of you came down Riverside Drive, and none of you expected someone to run a red light. If you're pulling into the church off of Riverside, pulling into the left, and people are coming Riverside this way, you did not expect people to run the red light and run into you as you're pulling in left into the church. None of you did that. You know why? Because you expect people to know how to drive. Have you been in our town long? Have you seen how people in this town drive sometimes? Sometimes they're not very good drivers. You go to Walmart, and you know what you expect when you go to Walmart. Listen, you don't expect people. You don't. When you're driving home here in just about 20, 30 minutes, guess what? You are not going to expect anyone to be texting and driving on the same time as you are driving on the road. You don't expect that. Guess what else? It's 11:35, and when you leave here, it'll probably be about 12:05. By the time you get in your car, deal with the light. And guess what? You're not going to expect anyone at 12:05 on a Sunday afternoon driving through Riverside or Mount Cross or Piney Forest, and you're not going to expect any of them to be driving, drinking and driving. You're not going to expect that. You don't expect that. But guess what? There are people who are drinking and driving in this town at 8 o'clock this morning. Can I tell you why? And they'll be drinking and driving at 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock. You know why? Because they were not prepared for the storms of life that they're going through. They're dealing with something. They're dealing with something difficult, and they weren't prepared for it, and so they're not responding in a healthy or godly manner. And when you and I are not prepared for the storms of life, guess what? You and I do exactly what the disciples do. You and I, we lose our mind. We go crazy. And listen, Jesus brought calm into the situation, because what did the storm bring? The storm brought chaos. Jesus brings calm. And when you're not prepared for the storm of life, when you're not ready for the storm of life, guess what you're going to do? You're going to experience chaos and anxiety and discouragement. And that's what happens. And so the question is this: how do you prepare for the unexpected? I'll give you one place to start. One place to start on how to prepare for the unexpected is Ephesians 6:11 through 18. Ephesians 6:11 through 18. That is called the armor of God. And every day, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to put on the armor of God. I'm going to put on my helmet of salvation, my breastplate of righteousness. I'm going to put on the belt of truth. I'm going to put on the shoes of the gospel of peace. I'm going to put on the shield of faith, and I'm going to carry the sword of the Spirit, the word of God, in my hand. And then at the very end, it's not an actual physical weapon, but at the very end of Ephesians 6, verse 18, it says this: and above all else, pray always. How do you prepare for the unexpected? I put on the armor of God. Hard times are unavoidable. They happen to everyone. Don't hide it, because God wants to use the storms other people have gone through to help you. And you prepare for it by putting on the armor of God. Hard truth number 2 is this: hard times are purposeful. Hard times are purposeful. Where are all the parents in the room? Raise your hand. Parents, keep them up. How many of you parents have ever had to discipline your kids? Raise your hand. Some of you are like, I just saw 3 more hands go up. Like, I didn't know if I was a parent until I had to discipline my kids, and now I'm a parent. Listen, your kids ever, they disobey, so you discipline. Remember, when you discipline your kids, you do not discipline your kids to take out your anger and frustration on your kids. You do not discipline your kids to punish your kids. This is Parenting 101. The reason you discipline your kids is to prepare and protect them. You prepare them and protect them from what could be coming. And so what happens is your kid disobeys, you have to discipline them, and in the middle of that, you get down on your knee and you say, son, daughter, let me teach you life lesson 101. And you want to teach them a lesson about discipline and disobedience and respect and being nice to their brother or sister and taking care of someone. And you want to teach them this grand, big picture life lesson. No! They don't want to hear a lesson in the middle being disciplined. Just get the punishment, because they see it as punishment. Get the punishment over with and let me move on. And you want to teach them a lesson. Some of you parents have ever had your kids play sports and they lost at their soccer game or their t-ball game or their baseball game or whatever it was that they were playing, and you want to get down on your knee and say, son, daughter, guess what? Sometimes you're going to lose in life. Sometimes life is unfair. Sometimes the ref misses the call. And you want to teach them this, and guess what? The last thing they want in that moment is a life lesson. And I promise you this. If you're going through a storm of life today, and you're going through pain and suffering and heartache, and there's some type of sorrow that grieves you deeply, and you're just waiting for the rushing of the water to stop so you can come up out of the water and see above it all, in this passage, I promise you, you see the three most obvious purposes for why God takes you through storms of life. And that's the reason, listen, the reason why we're so upset with God is because we're like, God, why are you taking me through this? And we don't understand God's plan for your life. We know Romans 8:28. Romans 8:28 says, for we know that all things, everybody say all things. We know that all things work together for your good to those who love God and are called to his purpose. God can use anything you go through for your good and his glory. We just don't want to have to go through anything. That's the problem. And so what happens with the disciples? The disciples are in the middle of the storm. There's chaos. The waves are crashing against the boat. They run to where Jesus is, and they say, don't you care? Don't you care that we're going to drown? And the reason why so many people are so frustrated, bitter, angry, and discouraged, and in rebellion against God today is because you feel like God hasn't answered that question the way you want. Oh, you went to God and you asked Jesus the same question the disciples did. Jesus, don't you care what's going on in my life? Don't you care how physically hurting I am? That this knee will never get better, this shoulder will never move correctly? Don't you care about the report that the doctor just gave me? Don't you care that my spouse has left the house and I'm not sure if they're coming back? Don't you care that my employer is leaving me up in the air for whether or not I've got a job tomorrow? Don't you care, God? And we're trying to tell God, Jesus, what he should be doing. Wake up and do something. And we accuse Jesus of not caring, of being neglectful, of ignoring the storms in our life. And Jesus wakes up and he rebukes the wind and the waves. He says, peace, silence. And there was a calm. And it was after he calmed the storm, Jesus asked his disciples two questions. And do you want to know why you're going through some of the storms of life? It's the same two questions that Jesus asked the disciples, he's asking you today. And question number one is this. He asked the disciples, why are you afraid? Are you ready for this? Here's why some of you are going through a storm of life. It is to deal with your fear. You're afraid of something. And here's what happens. When you're afraid of something, you're going to let go of the rope. You're going to throw it away. You're going to jump out of the boat, and you're going to swim for shore and take matters into your own hands. Do you know why? Because fear is going to make you come face to face. Fear makes you come face to face with, who do I trust? Do I trust myself to swim to shore over the wind and over the waves and over the storm, or do I trust the one who created the waves to begin with? Why are you afraid? Remember, the disciples had just come from a day of ministry, and they had just seen Jesus do miracle after miracle after miracle. Go and read Mark chapter 4, and you see about 6 different miracles in Mark chapter 4, or teaching lessons. And once again, the disciples are so much like you and I. No matter how many times we see Jesus do something amazing, in our fear, we allow it to impact our chaos. and we get anxiety and anxious and nervous and discouraged and mad, and we accuse Jesus or accuse others. Why are you afraid? And today, the reason you're going through a storm, because Jesus wants to deal with your fear. And then he says this, why do you still have such little faith? The second purpose for your storm is to grow your faith. It's to grow your faith. What in your life needs to be grown today? What needs to be expanded today? Is your faith in Jesus the same as it's always been since the day you gave your life to Christ, or has it grown and expanded? In fact, look what 1 Peter chapter 1 says, verses 6 and 7. It says, so be truly glad. Be glad, there is wonderful joy ahead. Even though you must endure many trials for a little while, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold, so when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring so much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. When you go through a storm, your faith is going to prove one of two things. Listen to me. I put it there in your notes. When the storm comes, you are either going to run to God or you are going to run from God. The faith, are you going to run? Listen, they ran to Jesus and said, Jesus, wake up. But do you know why they told Jesus to wake up? Because they wanted him to jump over the boat and swim to shore with them. Don't you care? Your faith. Listen to me. It's not faith in Jesus if you give up on Jesus the moment life gets hard. Now, I know there are underlining situations. I even mentioned this last week for those of you that were here, but listen to me. It's not commitment to your spouse till death do us part when you walk out the moment it gets hard. Now, and I know there may be other reasons that the relationship doesn't work. I get that. I understand that. But hard? Everybody has hard. Parents, we don't give up on our kids the first moment they disobey. The first moment parenting is hard. In fact, you know what we do? We go out of our way to love our kids even more. Is your faith genuine? Is it real? The reason some of you are going through the storm is to test your faith. And then he calms the storm. And in verse 41, the disciples look at each other in amazement, and they say this, who is this man? Who is this man? And do you know why some of you today are going through the storms of life? Trouble, hardship, trials. Here it is. It's to increase your awe. Who is this man? Who is this man that even nature itself obeys him? Even nature itself obeys him. Like they've never seen that. Remember, they grew up on the water. They knew it better than anything. It was their restful place. They knew the water. They understood it. And listen, understand this. Every one of us in this room, everyone, we've all been through an actual physical, literal storm. We've been through rainstorms. We've been through hurricanes. We've been through tornadoes. We've been through snowstorms. And guess what we want to do? We want to go outside or stand in our living room out the window. Stop raining! Why? Because the rain and the wind, it knocks trees over. It knocks your power out. It does it all. It makes it, you can't go to the store because of the snow. And guess what? You stand there, at least I have. Stop snowing, stop snowing. And guess what? It don't stop snowing. But Jesus made it stop. Who is this that even nature obeys him? I was out of town this week doing some ministry planning that I try to do every few months to just get away and plan and pray for the direction of our church. And I was at a hotel, and the hotel I was at, it was Friday afternoon. I was flying back late Friday night. And Friday afternoon, coming through this hotel, was a pretty famous past Saturday Night Live cast member. And, you know, people knew him and was all over the place. And, you know, as soon as he walks through, everyone in the hotel starts talking and murmuring, and things are here and things are there. And then everybody in the hotel, and it's a big hotel, everybody starts rushing. And everybody just wants to take a picture. And they get out their phones and they take pictures, and they see him walking, and they try to take a selfie with him. They don't stop him, but they all just stop in amazement. I'm at a hotel, and look who's here. Oh, my goodness, look who's here. And it's just, they just stop, and they're speechless, and they're just looking at each other. And here's the deal. When was the last time Jesus made you stop? And you were speechless, and you actually took a picture of the moment to memorialize what God had just done for you. There's a reason why the Bible calls it childlike wonder. Mommy, look how beautiful it is. Daddy, look how awesome this field is. Look how great Disney is. Look how great this baseball stadium. Look how wonderful. Look how big. Look how majestic the ocean is. Do you remember? Do you remember a day in your life when you just stood in amazement? I stand amazed at the beauty of God. For some of you, you stood in amazement on your wedding day. Mostly it was the men. I can't believe she said yes. For some of you, it was the day your son or daughter was born. For some of you, it was the day your son or daughter graduated high school. Listen, you didn't care if they graduated summa cum laude. You just wanted them to graduate kumbaya. But you stood amazed that Jesus can calm the storm. And when was the last time you just stood in awe? And I'll promise you this, the reason you're in a storm of life right now, there may be other purposes, but I promise you, the main purpose is for one of those three right there. Is Jesus confronting your fear? Is Jesus confronting your faith? And is Jesus confronting what stops you in your tracks? Hard truths in hard times, they're unavoidable, but you can't prepare for them. They are purposeful. You just have to recognize what is Jesus trying to do in me at this moment. And number three, hard times are temporary. Hard times are temporary. They don't last forever. Now, I know when you and I think of the word temporary, when you and I think of temporary, we think of a 20-minute wait at Texas Roadhouse before our table is ready. First of all, that's not a 20-minute wait. It's a 2-hour wait, okay? Let's be honest. But that's temporary. For some of you, you've gone through surgery, and the doctor said the recovery will be temporary. It may be days, it may be weeks, it may even be months of physical therapy, but it's temporary. Sometimes temporary might even mean a whole year. But you and I, we have this time period in mind of what is temporary. I don't know what is temporary, but I do know this. Everything is temporary in light of eternity. In light of eternity, everything is temporary. And here's the deal. You're holding on. You're trying to come up out of the water. You're trying to get up out of the water. And all this water is just splashing in your face. It's just splashing. And the temporariness is just splash after splash after splash, bounce after bounce after bounce. I don't want to get back up. I want to let go. I want to go to shore. And here's the deal. If you let go of the promises and the presence and the power of God too early, I'll promise you this. You will never get to the other side. And listen, what does Jesus say in verse 1 of chapter 5? So they arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. The title of this message is called The Other Side. The Other Side. I don't know how long it's going to take for you to get to the other side. But here's what I do know. I know if you let go of the rope too soon, not only will you not get to the other side, but you'll never even get to know what's on the other side. Listen, I love those memes that say you only had one job, you only had one job. And every few months, I like looking at those memes and seeing if there's anything new. And I came across 3 this week that I thought were pretty interesting. And one of them was this right here. You had one job. You had one job. You had one job. That's it. Do you know how to spell the word stop? Sometimes if you're out of town, you have to use the restroom when you're not at home. Listen, you had one job, buddy. You just had one job. Put up the next picture. Go ahead, right there. Listen, one job. Okay, the door's just not quite long enough, okay? The door's just quite long enough. And then my favorite one is this one right here. Here's my favorite one. Never do your best. Quit. You had one job. Just get the wording right. And here's the deal. You want to experience what's on the other side? You want to experience the miracle in the storm of your life? You want to experience the blessing in the middle of the storm? Never let go. You have to endure. 1 Peter chapter 1 told you. That is why we have wonderful joy. We have wonderful joy when we're able to endure the trials and the fire of life. And look what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 says it this way. It says, that is why we never give up. For our present troubles are small and they won't last very long. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we now see will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. The things you see right now, the storms right now, they will soon be gone. I don't know how soon. I just know soon. And I know you have to endure. So what does it say? It says, so we fix our gaze on that which is above, not that which is around us, and not that which is behind us. I heard a statement by Pastor Jonathan Falwell not too long ago that has resonated with me. And it says this, what is nothing compared to what will be. What is nothing compared to what will be. Look at that statement. I love that. What you're going through right now is temporary and momentary compared to where you're going and what you have waiting for you on the other side. But you have to endure and you have to keep your eyes on what is above. That's why Psalm 40 says, I will look at the hills above because that's where my help comes from. My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth. My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the one who might act like and look like he's asleep, but he's the one who controls the storm itself. Will you prepare yourself daily? Will you allow his purposes to work in your life? Will you endure and hold on to the rope? And will you keep your eyes on that which is before you? Let me pray for you. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I love this song that we're going to end this service with. It's a celebration song that reminds us that our Lord is always with us. Let this song speak to you. Worship. I look up to the hills because that's where my help comes from. And when the disciples did call out to Jesus, Jesus woke up and he calmed the storm. Sometimes you just got to call on the right person. And let him calm the storm in your life so you can experience the miracle. We will not let fear, chaos, we will not quit and give up, but we will endure. We will stand in awe, and we will keep our eyes on Jesus. Lord, we look to you today. Let's stand. Let's worship. Let's celebrate in this place.